What's up, y'all? It is Sunday. It is March 16th. It's Throwing Light. I'm LTJ Reeds. And if you're not throwing light, you're not acting right. We have got a panel on this Sunday. We are focusing on Asian visibility and also stopping Asian hate in general, so we're going to have a really good, healthy conversation here. We started doing panels this year, so I hope to keep bringing these conversations and helping change the community one conversation at a time. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. I'm honored to have two fresh faces here on this panel, but our returning person is going to be GS Yang, who I had the honor of being one of my judges for International Mr. Leather last year. He has also been on the show when we discussed doing this panel, and so I invited him to come back on, and we just discussed, like, why don't we just do a panel for your turn? And so, luckily, he helped me find these two wonderful people here. I did know SpankCake a little bit from afar, but I want to go ahead and introduce International Ms. Boo Black 2024 SpankCake. How you feeling? You feeling?
Feeling great.
All right, you're on Throwing Light. You're going to feel even better by the end of the show, I promise. All right, then we got Master Leather here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy Sunday.
Yes, happy Sunday it is, and we're going to have a happy conversation. All right, y'all. So we're going to kick it off. We'll have the community get to know SpankCake and Master Leather, but so let's start off with SpankCake. How did you get involved in the community? You are International Ms. Boot Black 2024. What led you to that journey?
Well, it's funny because I actually really practiced boot blocking privately. I just never really found a place for me on the boot block stands. I wasn't even sure if someone that looked like me could boot block, especially the LA community. Um, there's not that many places you can boot black. And I had not discovered the queer bars yet. And so it really was more like at the dungeons and things like that. But there really just kind of came a point when it just everything felt right about running this year, with especially after the pandemic and all the Asian hate that was happening. I mean, that was terrible that, especially our elderly were being attacked randomly on the streets. And it just didn't seem like there was a lot of rage or outcry. And same thing when there was the mass shooting in at the massage parlor. And it, there was a refusal to refer to it as a hate crime. And so I just felt like it was really time. It was also a point in my life where I felt like if I was outed, I could handle it. My kids are older, everything like that. So um, I knew it was going to be, very new, and you know, I I just went for it. And so I guess in that way, I'm kind of an Asian stereotype of overachieving and going straight to international. But um, that's how I got here.
So that's awesome. Okay, we're going to kick it over to Master Leather. Are you still there?
I'm here. Okay,
All
I'm
right.
here
Why
and I'm
don't you tell us a little bit about your journey into the community? I think I lost your camera.
it says the host has removed your camera. So I'm
Oh,
trying to it's
no. Let me
hold
fix
the
that.
light disabled by host. So I'm like going, oh, you don't want me on screen. Okay.
Not at
There we go.
all. I don't know how that
Okay.
happened.
I was getting a little worried there. I'm like, okay,
Oh.
uh, my journey in the leather community started in the late 80s, early 90s. And I came in through in Chicago through the underground lesbian leather movement, and it was very underground. It was there's this is a time when there's no internet, there's really no way to find others except for you see them on the street or you go to the leather bar, and it was very much um, it, it's not like today where you could find dungeons and Google it and um, be a member. You had to kind of find the folks, and then they had to vet you really hard, and they had to make sure that you weren't a cop or undercover or something like that. This is a time when bars are still getting raided and such. So time period I came up. I came up during a time when Chicago is a big mecca for leather. I mean, we have the leather archives here, but even back then, we had, because of um, the 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 gay community specifically, because that's basically where a lot of this stuff comes from, and this was the place where it happens. So I pride myself in being part of that. I did leave for a little bit, which is why I came up when I came back. I came up with the name Redux because Redux means a return or rebirth. So I came back around the like I don't know like early 2000s, and I've been back since. So my journey was like I went in and out, but always leather. But I wasn't always in the lifestyle. But that's where my journey began. My journey began with always being active in LGBTQIA rights at that time. Because I mean, I never thought I would see gay marriage. I mean, that time I was at the March on Washington in '93, and God, I'm aging myself. But yeah, I was there fighting for queer rights, and that's basically my journey. And now I'm very active in education. My girl and I teach at a lot of places. We and that's how it started. My whole thing was to share and do community through education. I'll shut up.
I
That was a
want. What'd you say?
I said, that's a lot. I'll shut up now. Everybody
No,
else.
it's not a lot, but I want to thank you for being a pioneer in this journey, and I apologize to you for what's happening in this country right now. It seems like just a huge disrespect to you and the people that have been fighting the earliest journeys, and to fall backward, it's a little shameful. And but I want you to know that I'm self-aware, I'm aware, and I know what people like you've done for our community, and I uphold and uplift you, and I want to fight as hard to make this go back in the right direction. So I grew up, as a little kid in the '90s, and my first exposure to my thought process of the queer community was Pedro Zamora on The Real World San Francisco. And I don't know if it was that little bit of exposure to me, but I never had this fearfulness of like HIV and AIDS. It wasn't, I guess, just as a kid process, I was like, this is something I'm educating myself about. This is something to be, it just, I never, maybe call it television, but I think having exposure to that as just a child made me more open to educating myself later on in life, you know? And so, I think it's crazy. I think it's absolute insanity what's happening right now in the United States. But we got some serious fires in this community. And we didn't have Goddess on here tonight. I know she was going through some things, but I had Goddess on a couple of weeks ago, and she's very direct in terms of what we needed to do and stuff. So yeah, like I said, it's crazy. Before we get started, I want to kick it back over to G for a second. What have you been up to since the last time you were here?
Oh wow, yeah, it's been a few months. Right now uh we have been working locally to build communities one steps at a time, and Master Leather Redux is part of our model in like how to be engaged locally. I'm very excited to share that there will be a major leather event in early May that will kind of involving recognition of leather heritage in the city of Chicago. And since May is also AAPI Heritage Month, we're also happy to share that we are in the process of producing a local forum specifically for AAPI identified Kinksters to come together in a safe space and talk about their experiences, histories, thoughts, reflections about being Asian and kinky in today's America. So we're very excited about how this is coming together. Master Leather Redux is actually also part of the team in creating this opportunity, this forum, this space. So we're excited about this event. It will be on the second Saturday, the day before Mother's Day, near Chinatown in Chicago.
All right. You guys have a very strong presence, all three of you guys. So I think that the question level difficulty for this interview, I think I'm going to do a medium high. So let's see if we're going to see what happens. But yeah, well, y'all, let's go ahead and jump in and let's get started. Okay. We're here to stimulate conversation, have the difficult conversations. This is where I want to start because ultimately, what is going to be the issue that we want to overcome is racism in our own community. I know during the pandemic, and I know during the pandemic, the issue I see and why I feel like we have this fracture in our community in terms of people that are actually pro-conservative, which is weird right now, and like LGB without the T, this new group that's formed right now. I know for a fact living in Louisiana, I lived in a small town, Lafayette. It's very much gay conservatism, which essentially is just racism. They were calling it the China virus there. You know what I'm saying? This is people with that somewhat say they identify with us being racist. And I think that racism is the unifier that makes them feel like they're a part of that group. I think really honestly, racism is the root that puts all those right wing groups together because they're kind of very different. I mean, you've got like the Ku Klux Klan and Christians, so white nationalist Christians, you know what I'm saying? So the issue here is how do we focus on how do we deal with this aspect of our community in terms of like racism? SpankCake, how have you encountered racism within our community?
When you mean our community, do you mean the greater leather
I want to
community?
focus on our internal community right now.
You mean among Asians?
No, let's say the leather community. Yeah.
Oh, leather community. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
leather.
Okay. Um, how has racism come up?
Yeah. Or how have you encountered racism within our community?
Um, yeah, I think a big one that happened recently was um when I first became a title holder, my second conference. At my second conference, I was hosting a BIPOC social, and I was told by somebody that I had no right to do that without putting a Black person in the promotional material.
I remember that.
And so immediately there was a a huge flood of people coming on to my page and posting how I was acting racist, and so it really has affected me in wondering if I am a part of the BIPOC community. Um, I don't know. It was really shocking to me, and I was even more shocked when I didn't hear any support saying, "Hey, let's let's clear up what BIPOC means," and then to have somebody tell me what rights I had with my identity was also startling, considering our whole community is based on how we identify ourselves.
So the issue is that I noticed a lot of that, and I had this conversation, I think just with Chuck King last week about this needing to like police competitions and visibility in that and not using that energy as a greater good to start focusing on being that like putting that I don't want to call it aggressive energy, but that call out, all that stuff. Why are we not calling out our enemies? So I get as someone that has now been in three title competitions. I've won one of three. I've been international Mr. Leather. I get very stressed out when I see the community on social media constantly fighting over contests. More so, it bothers me now, being that number 47 just won the election, and it just seems like the petty stuff. It just seems really petty right now, and it's like, why are you waiting to see just a photo of representation? Like, if you want to see that, give recommendations, right? Like, why not tell us who you think you would want to see on there? But I think that people are just kind of waiting for something to do sometimes. And the thing is that it's one thing if it's constructive criticism, but it's different when it's like, okay, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, and you're not getting any feedback of anyone telling you how to improve on that. You've probably judged tons of contests now, SpankCake. I'm sure they have not all gone smoothly, right?
Right.
Yeah. I've judged four, and two of them had controversies. So, but my thing is that do you see how people get really pumped up and interested in the drama, right?
Mm.
So, how do we, as a community, and someone that's holding an international title right now, like what steps is it going to take to stop the infighting in our community?
Honestly, my opinion is I believe that we need to call out our own.
And when you say that, in what regards?
Um, let's say Master Leather Redux starts mouthing off and is, saying something that was hurtful to a different community. Let's just say like the Latino community. It's not, it should be our job as Asian people to say, hey, let's talk about this. How can we do better? That way, we are teaching each other and we're keeping each other accountable. This prevents people from saying, pointing the other way. Oh no, it's you. It's you. You're the problem.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to discuss things like that because of shared experience. We might know what they meant, like perhaps it, like from a cultural perspective, we can point out like, oh, I totally know why you said it that way, but let me tell you this is why it's inappropriate or why it's harmful or and then from there, you know, they can find some peace, in talking, but the call out needs to be from within, I believe, like your own, community, your own sub community.
Master Leather Redux. So, have things changed in terms of what Asian racism looks like in the community?
Wow, that's broad. I would say I would say there's so many layers to that because um, there are a lot of isms in just in general, let alone you put that other layer of um, a counterculture or subculture like leather, and then you add all these other nuances. So there's all these layers in there. So it is racism the same? Yeah, there's still racism is there. When I started, I the racism appears the same but differently. There's still gatekeeping that happens. I was very lucky that I found these women that were willing to let me in and play and learn from them. I was very fortunate. That doesn't always happen. Now, given at that time, I was the only Asian in the group. There was no other BIPOC people but me. And so that's a type of gatekeeping. That's like I was very lucky. And I feel lucky because I couldn't have found this community without that. Fast forward, I leave and come back. So I have the perspective of what it was like before. And now coming back here, there's different nuance because now people are a lot more vocal. I mean, we were not as vocal back then because it was very underground. It was almost like a spy network. You had to know somebody to get to the party, to know I'm not kidding, to know the password to get into the dungeon. It was very hidden and hardly accessible. Now in this world where everything is supposed to be accessible, it really isn't, because there's still those other gradients in there, such as what is your gender that you can get in? What is your race can you get in? Do you, what is, and I've experienced it. I've been at the dungeon when the fetishism of Asian women affect me. This white man comes up to me in the dungeon and says, who's your dom? And I'm like, I'm the dom. And he couldn't believe it. And I was like, yeah, I'm the dom. Leave me the fuck alone.
Yeah.
Because, there's a stereotype of, the submissive Asian, and, and I'm a little person, so I probably look, but no, I'm not, I'm not that person. So it's still the same, because those stereotypes are still there in our society of what people think the fetishism of women and Asians and in general. So it hasn't really changed. If anything, it's more vocal because of the way the climate is now. It's like social media has made it that you could just say stuff and hide behind the keyboard and not be accountable.
Yeah.
It's easier in the type of cowardice to just say things. I mean, what Grace was saying, and then you want to call people out. And really, there's no courage to call people and like, what you said was really messed up. Because even if you call them in, they're going to throw it on fat on Facebook, on Instagram. Yeah. There's no one to really hear you. If anything, people all want to say the things instead of realize that you're affecting the community and how people are being perceived. I don't think there's that responsibility of the damage people really do.
Yeah. I mean, it's like defamation, basically. I want to touch on the word gatekeeping that you mentioned. And if you would elaborate a little bit to the viewers what you mean by gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping is basically either very overtly or not overtly ways that people cannot access spaces, either overtly, not really allow BIPOC people to come to spaces, not offer ways to do it, or not allowing people who are maybe have physical and sorry, there's some sounds in the background. Allow people who have different physical abilities to get to spaces. There are 2 or 3 dungeons here in Chicago that is on the 3rd floor. So if it's not ADA compliant, and then you add other things. When I started, a lot of the dungeons were owned by cis gay white men and pro-doms. So where do the lesbians go? Where we were lucky that, part of my story is I was lucky that the women I hung out with were good friends with the men that ran the Hellfire Club here in Chicago. And I was able to go to the Hellfire Club. People don't believe that. That's bullshit. You can't get in there. That's just for men. And people had called me out on social media on it. They thought I was like, no, I was there. Believe me, I took a class from Guy Baldwin on flogging in my kinkling days. I was there. But that's the way it was before. But women really didn't have access. So you've got all these different layers of race, gender, and all these, and that gatekeeps you, doesn't allow you to access that in some way. So is it a little better these days? Well, during COVID, some dungeons got called out for being blatantly racist, that they didn't allow Black people, Asians, Hispanic, whatever, in. And isms just run by primarily male doms and not a lot of, so I hope I didn't try to make it.
The thing about what I want everyone to know, especially with that, is that like we're having conversations that don't happen normally. So anything you're bringing to the table, this is a conversation that didn't exist until now. You get what I'm saying? So please, knowledge, and you can always come back again in the future. All right, I want to kick it over to G. You wanted to add some things.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what SpankCake and Master Leather Redux have said, and actually also one of your early comment about these queer conservatives, right? I think there is an underlying mental framework beneath the transphobia, beneath the racism, is like a simplistic worldview, right? That treats things in binary terms, gender has to be male or female. There's nothing in between, even though we know biologically that's just not the case, right? It's just gender is a very social and culturally specific construct. And further on, as Master Leather Redux has talked about, right, the gatekeeping part. But I also had my own experience encountering such microaggressions in a very liberal area. Not to name the names specifically this time, but there is a community leader at a cocktail party and saw that I was carrying a flogger and just said, "Oh, I've never seen an Asian top." And at the time, it was very shocking to me. At the time, I wasn't quite sure how to respond, but a friend of mine uh, went right in and almost punched the person to the face. So at the time, I felt like I was feeling very supported by my allies. And not to say like you have to punch someone who's being a racist, but uh, it is important to think about, what we can do as allies, right? Allies to not specifically Asians, but to any kind of marginalized people in our community, right? If we're seeing something, as SpankCake says, we have to call out that. And if we're seeing transphobic behavior, we must call out that because otherwise, we're just gonna giving it a pass. The Another aspect I want to quickly point out is the so-called Asians being a model minority myth, and how damaging this stereotype is both to Asian within the Asian communities, as well as Asians vis-a-vis other ethnicity minorities, right? So if we trace the history of this myth that Asians somehow managed to achieve better social, economic, or education outcome because of alleged cultural characters, such as being hard worker or being docile, being submissive, not speaking up, right? So if we trace the roots of this came in from the 1950s and 60s white propagandists, right? There are white newspapers, white authors, white columnists talking about creating this myth, and part of that was to counter the civil rights movement at the time, to implicitly say like all the other racial minorities should behave as this imagined model minority does, right? So this myth itself is a white supremacist construct that is very divisive among non-white minorities. And also it has such a toll on Asians as well, because being a supposedly model minority also require you to fit into a very heteronormative mode of behavior to achieve the so-called American dream in a very narrow way, right? You have to like get married, have kids, have to be healthy, able-bodied, right? And perform compulsive heteronormativity, whereas it's also being seen as always somehow alien and foreign because of the alleged, cultural characters of your ethnicity group, of being like not aggressive enough, or being too passive, or being too nerdy, or being whatnot, right? And as finally being this myth of model minority also really erased a lot of gender non-conforming people, right? So if you are non-binary, if you're trans, then it's seen as like not fulfilling the expectation, right? So I think the cultural stereotype cuts really deep, and it hurts both the Asian communities within, as well as Asians' relationship with other ethnicity groups. So that's just a quick comment.
So, it's interesting now that, we're kind of in the meat here of the situation. I find that I don't think I had the terminology Asian model minority. I don't think I had that in my thing. And that's so fascinating and that's so interesting because, you know, a lot of things that I've run into as a predominantly African American male, got a Creole background, you know, black's supposed to be tops. Well, that's not who I am, but still, that's not what I was trying to say. So, but the expectation that you be black, hung, you know, and then, you know, so when I got to Austin, there were black bottoms, and that wasn't socially the expectation, if that makes sense. But I've dated multiple either racist or ignorant white guys where they've either not known that I was black or they told me I was the first black person they ever had interaction with. And females too, when I've dated females, but I found women not to be so I can click with women on a deeper level and be a little bit more honest, where I'm a little bit more defensive with men sometimes because of I'm not a I don't want to be someone's kink, if that makes sense, or something like that. Like, you know, I've been in a lot of spaces, and I've seen how straight men behave, and how they try to actually express those homosexual like desires in straight ways, I guess you could say. I don't know. But I am of the mentality that gender is a creation of how we act that, and our sexuality is a creation of our interpretations and our experiences. And I know it's really difficult to grow up and be like, oh, you know, either you're gay or straight, you're black or white. There's like this no in between when we know that there is. And so we're essentially back in this cultural war where it's trying to squeeze us back. And I think, y'all, and this is just my thought process, what makes us different from like 1930s Germany and you got 2025 United States of America is that they're trying to like whitewash everything at once. And at some point, that's not going to work for people, but we don't know when that point's going to be. But it would be one thing. But once the trans thing, once they use trans people enough to get most of their agenda down, they're going to start going for the other issues, right? So, you know, they're taking away Women's History Month. Isn't that crazy? So my question to you now, SpankCake, and I want to follow Master Leather Redux, is that you have a triple down situation here. Uh, First, you're a woman, you're Asian, and you're part of the leather community. So you've got like these three very difficult hurdles to jump over. Am I correct?
I mean, for sure, but I mean, I present femme, I present straight, so I honestly feel like I have a lot of privilege in that way.
Interesting. Interesting. What about you, Master Leather Redux?
Well, I also am, I identify as lesbian or queer. So that's another thing that adds there. And in my own community, but back in the day, not so much now, but I was, the way they identified this whole thing that you had back in the day, not so much now. But when I was starting, it was you had to be butch or femme, and I was more what they call a soft butch, and I was not taken seriously. No, I'm very butch. I don't mind wearing makeup, and I'll wear a dress. So that doesn't bother me, and I think I flow more with the kind of queer identity now. It's more fluid. So I have all those things stacked against me, and let alone in playing in a lot of dungeons that are here are definitely more hetero. So there's that. There's running up against people who don't understand. No, I am not gonna do you and your wife, and no, you can't watch. And no, I'm not. I'll beat all y'all. I don't care. I beat everybody. I'm not having sex with all y'all. So the queerness adds another layer to it too, because most of the dungeons are owned by cis straight folks. So it makes it that makes it interesting.
SpankCake, back to you. So I live with privilege. I mean, I have accident reports, police reports all identify me as a white male. So I definitely had privilege and was able to not be the target, if that makes sense. Where now I don't care if I'm the target. I want to be who I am and have all these experiences. Passing is a thing. And that kind of kicks back into the queer conservative. They are themselves passing because they're trying to not be um, targeted. Now that you've been in this position, SpankCake, you know, International Miss Boot Black, and you're traveling and stuff, are you still met more with that you are them representing? Or what am I trying to say here? Or are you treated like that within the community essentially? Like you have privilege?
Um, I'm not sure. It's, when you're a title holder, you're meeting so many people, so I don't know if I would say that I feel like um, you know, if your question is if I feel like I'm met with privilege. Um,
I think I'm kind of saying, like, do you feel that your approach as an Asian femme woman or your approach as something different?
yeah, no, I think people assume I'm an Asian femme woman.
I assume you're straight.
I think people don't know because I don't really like focus on my sexuality. But I but I have two male partners right now, and so it's not crazy for somebody to assume that. I personally identify as being pansexual, so
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I identify with sapiosexual, bisexual, demisexual, all of the more difficult. I'm very layered. I'm very layered. And I try to tell people what sapio. I said literally, like, dude, if somebody can have a conversation with me, you're opening up me. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it just, funny joke is I was an English teacher, college English teacher for a while. And people ask me all the time, "Oh, did you sleep with your students and stuff like?" Which ethically I would not do. Please don't do that. Don't sleep with your students. But I told them even if that were the case, they were so dumb that it turned me off. Like, and the reason I say that is because I'm teaching in Louisiana, y'all, and a very like not go for education. They still have black and white proms. My students were telling me, like to this day. So I just, I tell people like it's easy to have fantasies, but sometimes you need to meet reality with your fantasies sometimes. But like I find it very much a turn off to not have the desire to be educated. If you don't have the desire to be educated, then I'm not going to roll with you. It's like that same group of people. I'm saying the ones that if I don't like the news you like, it's fake. It's just like how can you work with that? You can't, you know? So we're getting into the latter part of the episode, Master Leather Redux. Okay, so there's a lot of what the community, what it was like then, and what it's like now. Where do you really see? Where do we need to focus our direction as we move forward as a community that can help maybe uh, help push the Asian community to the forefront to get more visibility and recognition and appreciation? Like, how can we be a better community to do better with the Asian community?
Well, first off, it's not about pushing it to the forefront. It's just being part of this talk right here, just being visible and acknowledging that there are many different people and acknowledging that there is what is privilege like. I read an article that was really kind of put it very succinctly for me that privilege is like air. So if you have a lot of air, it's easy for you to breathe and you can get through things a lot easier. But if you're not privileged enough to have a lot of air, it's going to be hard for you. It's going to be way harder for you. Maybe days you can't really breathe. And that's what it's like it's harder for people to already move through this country with what's going on. And especially my trans siblings and let alone queer people, it's just harder. And then you add what we look like, and it makes it tough. And we're not. This is not about the I don't know, there's an expression that's around. That's what is called the suffering Olympics or something like that. It's not about who is suffering more or who had more things happen to them. We have to unite. If anything, the call to action is to not build walls, is to actually build bridges amongst all the community, because this fight is bigger, and we really need to see that. If we don't see that, and we're like, well, they're going after them, they're not bothering me, kind of attitude is what's going to kill us.
Yeah.
And it's frightening on a I don't know how else to say it.
No.
And we really need to so the visibility is not only to like acknowledge that, hey, we can only access certain things too, but to unite, to actually do the things you may not want to do. And organizing and agitating might look differently for some people. I might not be able to go on a march, but I can petition, I can send money to assist, I can vote for people that I really want in there. And it's to be aware about what's going on. And I mean, the things that's going on for immigration rights right now for Asians and others. I mean, it's, Trump recently put a list of Asian countries and others that could not come in. That is, it's frightening. It's just controlling who gets to breathe. And we have to fight for our air right now.
You're absolutely right. And, to go back to, like I made a post the other day, I said, why life is already hard. Why would we want to go out of our way to make someone's life harder? And you're doing it because you're not taking this brain that we're all given and taking the initiative to understand. Like all these things that are happening, if we just had conversations like this, that's understanding. But I just want to talk about that idea of making things harder, just like what Master Leather Redux just said, that only some of us can breathe. And I think that's a perfect metaphor for what's going on, is that some of us are losing our air supply. And this is frightening. And Master Leather Redux, I just want to say, like you said, to the horror of all this is that every time I hear LGB without the T, like I physically, my stomach, I want to throw up. I myself can't accept that. It's really hard for me because it is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like one of the stupidest things I have ever heard in my lifetime. And I don't know what y'all have heard in your lifetime, but it is the most counterproductive, the most self-defeatist. It's crazy. And the thing too is that, when I was doing leader, this is actually my second go into leadership. And a lot of people don't know that because I had my first opportunity to be the proud president in Lafayette, Louisiana. That was my go. And I didn't know much about the community. So I really and I was doing this for conservatives. So, I got sexually assaulted during this, and that group told me I had to put myself in a situation and deserved it. So these are very mean-hearted, very rough, like, if you don't pass, then we're going to call you out on that. So I don't know. I just find it very interesting that, we have these situations now that are created, and somehow, I guess, I don't like to say his name. Number 47 is managed. He does a good job at division and dividing. And so he's able to get into that aspect of every community and start like a rift, if that makes sense. Like everyone's just kind of like fractured. And again, that goes back to what we was saying previously, is that if we're divided, we're a lot easier to be taken down. Can you help educate people on, let's say, what are some resources that the community can use in terms to help spread awareness or essentially bring more conversations like this to the table?
That is a big question, and I'll try my
I
best to
asked too
share.
many big questions. I'm sorry.
But I think it's as Master Leather Redux and SpankCake have said, right? A lot of time it is about being informed about the complicated histories of different minority groups. It requires the courage for us to confront our own, especially leather's own complicated history. We know like BIPOC people often were either underrepresented or invisible in the classic eras of leather's representation, whether stories or paintings or artworks. So there are a lot of historical baggage within the leather culture. And that is something that we have to confront today as well. So to start, I would recommend people to, if they're interested in learning about Asian history, one easy book to start is The Myth of the Model Minority, Asian American Facing Racism. It's by two scholars, Rosalind S. Cho and Joe F. Fegan. Came out in 2014, and it's based on extensive interviews of different Asian communities because Asian, let's face it, is also a very diverse community, right? There are over 30 ethnicities in being categorized as Asian in America. And each community have very unique challenges, right? So we should also be aware of those and not to try to use an umbrella term to say all Asians are the same. Um, also, if people are interested, look up Orientalism. Look into the history of how Asian culture were being presented in a very gendered way from the colonial times onward. That justifies the West's domination of Asian bodies. It emasculates Asian men as being passive or submissive. It frames Asian women as particularly exotic in their sexuality. And all of these baggages are still live with us today, as we have heard from different stories being shared today. And lastly, I would say let's be very safe because of the climate we're facing. Let's protect ourselves first. Let's make sure we are aware of digital privacy protection when we are organizing, and also work locally, right? Find local community, find people, find allies locally, maybe not even just Kinksters, right? We need to also build intersectional solidarities with groups that are not just our own, but also try to educate people who are not part of the leather community about the importance of standing up to gender and sexual minorities' rights. So as we are running out of time, I think I will just shut up at this moment. So
That's exactly why I called on you to ask that question. Thank you. We got plenty of information for people to take a step and to do something. We are getting towards the end of the show. Before we get there, I do want to bring it back to everybody one more time. Master Leather Redux. So, as we get ready to this interview and we're getting off and we're waking up tomorrow, we're starting a new day. Where would you like to see the leather community? That's kind of okay. So, what kind of progress would you like to see in our community as a whole?
I would like to see people to just be more conscious and to be self-aware about things that they think and things that they post. I mean, the things that SpankCake went through was just really unbelievable. I mean, that is really hurtful. Instead of supporting or being an ally or whatever, or being just a leather sibling and helping out, that happened. The irony of that event was that the term BIPOC was actually created to include everybody, because before it was just POC. So I had the irony that the term was, she was using the correct term to include everyone, but it's hard to get everybody in one spot because of all the other things I've mentioned, gatekeeping. I'd like to see people just be more self-aware and be kinder to each other. This is a rough time. And we need to really build more relationships with each other. And if people just saw the similarities, and it sounds so cliche, of our struggles, and not, focus on, well, we've suffered more, or you think you have problems, instead of we have the same problem. There's a lot of hate mongering because of people who, um, somehow we didn't think those folks aren't gonna get. I mean, remember how the first time that person was in there, people didn't think it was gonna happen, but I could see that. It's like, but no, it's fine. It's not fine, and people need to be aware it's not fine, and we need to do something.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. SpankCake, same thing. How can we improve in the future? What would you like to see?
Um, the term POC, people of color, just in itself is very much, a tenet of white supremacy. It's like the binary, you're white or you're not white, right? You're white or you're a person of color. And so I don't know if not serving white people in the near future is a possibility. So in that case, as people of color, I really do believe that in order for us to we all have so many gifts and so many things to share, and we need to come together, even if it's as POC, right? Like as non-whites, um, until we can dismantle that idea where everything is centered around whiteness. Write our histories down. Like we need to have this. But I really do believe, um, like G mentioned about the model minority myth, when we get accused, of like our proximity to whiteness being this, advantage, it is used to keep us down. Um, we need to be able to really point to ourselves so that we stop disconnecting with the other people of color. And I really would like us to see, come together and really support each other, and really make it true that all diversity is good diversity. All, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's yes, yes, it's healthy too. You know what I'm saying? Like to have options to think. Like I don't know, y'all. It's crazy, and even like I mean, and even transgender is something that's existed since the beginning of time too. And it's just like the fact that like knowledge is around us, and somehow people fall into this like not looking for knowledge thing, and it's crazy. G, wrapping things up with you. How can we see an improved future for our community?
I think I've already mentioned some in my previous comment, but like if I have to say that as a historian, I would say read history, right? Like learn about how does these terms come from? Like how do we even learn to categorize people based on skin colors, right? And like how does these constructs of gender as a binary system come into being? Some of them are very surprisingly recent, right? The binary gender only come into a thing in 19th century as sexology, so-called, Western sexology came into being. So they are not natural. They're not always there. And we really have to try to learn more about how these systems of oppression come into beings so we can better understand and build build empathy and sympathy with others, and try to inform ourselves so we can dismantle this kind of systems of oppression.
You're right. And I say, we're all here, y'all. We didn't ask to be born. We didn't ask to be born in this country. We didn't ask to be born in these bodies, but we're here and we got to fight, right? This is our challenge. This is why we're here. So let's just accept it, right? And as I'm learning, is that we can be serious, but let's not be too serious. Let's fight, but let's make sure that we are having fun as a community as we face these challenges because it is scary, but as long as we walk together, there's less to fear, you know? I want to thank everybody for being on this panel. Thank you so much. You guys don't understand how much these conversations help, how many people reach out to me because we're having talks like this. So I thank you so much for that. There's one last thing that you have to do before I let you go, though. And this is something I started this year. So I'm going to count to 3 and you're going to close the show, okay? And when I count to 3, you're going to say, if you're not throwing light, you're not acting right. Can y'all do that?
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say one more time. I'm going to count to 3. If you're not throwing light, you're not acting right. Here we go, y'all. 1, 2, 3.
If you're not
throwing light, you're not acting right.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
SpankCake. Thank you, Master Leather Redux and GS Yang for being on the show. That has been Throwing Light. Please pay attention to these, servants of the community. Please continue to support all of them. Let's continue to have these conversations. Let's do our best and let's fight for our rights. Thank you all so much. I'm LTJ Reeds, and that's Throwing Light, and I'm out. Thank you all.
Thank you.